Ron Sexsmith is a celebrated singer-songwriter with a career spanning over 3 decades. He's released 17 albums to date, with his latest album, The Vivian Line, featuring 12 new songs, all written and performed by Ron, and the album was recorded in Nashville with producer Brad Jones, who also played bass on 3 of Ron's earlier albums. And Ron joins us now. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm brilliant, thank you. So this new album, The Vivian Line, it was actually named after a rural route near your home, right?
That's true, yes.
So what was the significance of that location?
I'm always trying to find a title for an album, that doesn't single out a particular song, And when my wife and I moved to this new town of Stratford, Ontario, whenever we were coming here from Toronto, we'd end up on this Vivian Line, which is just minutes away from where we live, and whenever we would head out on the road, we would jump on the Vivian Line, and it would dump us out on the highway or the main road. So for me, it was kind of like a portal to and from my old life, which wasn't always that happy, to this new life where we're both we both feel we've been given like a second chance or something. So it just sort of meant that to me. I just was intrigued because I didn't know who Vivian was and all that.
What do you think is the most significant difference between your life in Toronto and your new life in Stratford?
Well, Toronto, towards the end, it wasn't a very happy place for us, I mean, we couldn't afford a house, so we were just renting, so we felt very insecure, that if our landlord dies, what happens to us and all this kind of. And I was starting to feel like this sort of old guy, walking around, go to these bars I used to go to, and I wouldn't know anybody anymore. The scene had changed, basically, and I felt a bit like a ghost or something. And we had our problems as well. And I just think coming here, we sort of we became closer, I think, and we met all these amazing people. And so it's just been a good thing. And we own a house now, which I never thought would ever happen. But we could, because we could afford one here. And it's just been, and also the effect it's had on me just in terms of nature, which I never had in Toronto. But now I walk along the river every day, and there's swans, and, we have bunnies in our yard, and there's an owl that lives in one of our trees. And so it's like this whole other Beatrix Potter kind of existence, so.
You describe it as an escape from your old life in Toronto.
Yeah.
Is it very much an escape? Do you feel like you're free now?
Yeah, we do. That's a good way of putting it, because, I guess we hadn't felt free in a long time. And we just, even during COVID, it was a really nice place to be, because I could still walk around the river, and we were bubbling with our close friends here and helped us get through it. It's just a whole different vibe, a much slower pace than Toronto. I mean, I lived there 30 years in Toronto, and it was a really great place for me for a long time. And then towards the end, it was sort of running on fumes. I was still telling myself it was a great place, but it didn't feel that way. So.
Yeah. So for the new album, The Vivian Line, what can we expect from it musically?
Anyone who has, any of my records, it's kind of an extension. I always try to write songs that are melodic and are concise and have thoughtful lyrics. That's kind of my sort of stock and trade, I guess. But I think, with this record, it really came together in a beautiful way. I really love Brad's production. I think he got a good vocal out of me. I'm proud of all the songs on all of my records, but I'm not always proud of my singing or the production and stuff. But I think with this one, it just really, it all came together.
So how did your collaboration with Brad Jones actually come about?
Well, as you said earlier, he played on some of my first records, and I always thought he was an incredible bass player. I think I knew he was a producer, but for some reason I was always working with somebody else, and I sort of lost touch with him. And during the pandemic, I stumbled upon an interview with him on in some recording magazine. And the interviewer was asking him some questions about different albums that he played on, and one of them was my second album. And he said such nice things, and I was like, oh, I always liked Brad, and so I just sent him an email saying, hey, I read this interview, and as turned out, he was still in the same recording studio in Nashville that I'd visited once back in the '90s. So I thought, and I don't know, I had these songs, and he seemed interested to hear them, and so I just went and demoed them, and it just kind of started like that. I just saw he said some nice things about me online, and I just forgotten how much I enjoyed playing with him all those years ago. And I knew, because I knew some of the records that he had produced, and so I knew he was good, but I actually wasn't really prepared for how good he actually is. Like, he did all the arrangements, all the string and woodwind arrangements and all that. So he's just really very capable person.
And were you expecting it to turn out this good? I mean, did you always know that with Brad at the helm, it was going to turn out great?
Well, I was hoping. With every new producer, there's always a bit of trepidation that you're going to butt heads about stuff, or even in the start when we were talking about the songs, there were certain songs that he didn't want to do that I really wanted to do, and vice versa. But when we got down there and started messing around with the songs, I think some of the ones that he wasn't sure about, he started to understand why I liked them or whatever. And there's a few that I didn't think would work. Actually, one of them was Diamond Wave, because that was such an old song. It was the only old song out of the batch. And I just put it on there because I'd been playing it around the house lately. And he thought, no, we got to do Diamond Wave. He goes, I think that could be a single or something. And I wasn't so sure, but I'm really glad we did that one. So it just, it sort of, I knew it was going to be good, or at least I felt that. But I was, when I was hearing things coming through the speakers, I was really blown away at how, he brought in this amazing drummer. So everything felt really good, like the grooves and stuff. So I just, and then also the funny thing is, being in Nashville, because we weren't allowed to travel to America for the longest time because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it opened up. We had this little window of time where we were able to go down there, make the record, and come home. And as soon as we came home, everything closed down again. So it really was kind of fateful, I guess you could say.
And being in Nashville, does that influence the music at all? Does it improve it, or would it have sounded exactly the same as if you were to record it back home?
Well, it certainly didn't influence, the writing of the songs. And I mean, there might be one moment of sort of that has a country kind of vibe. Nashville's changed so much too. There's so many musicians that live here, like rock musicians and all that kind of stuff. And it was weird though, because like I said, I visited his recording studio in the '90s, and it was in this kind of sketchy neighborhood, full of these old, warehouses and things like that. But since I've been back there, I mean, it's turned into the real hip part of Nashville, called Berry Hill, where all these restaurants and a lot of the people who used to be on Music Row moved their offices to Berry Hill. And so it's sort of, he stayed there. His studio is exactly the same, but it's sort of been changed all around him. And it's kind of the place where everybody wants to be now in Nashville. So it didn't, and we were working inside. We didn't see much daylight. So we could have been in any city on earth, actually.
Did you soak up a bit of the culture while you were there? Maybe try some hot chicken?
Oh, yeah, we had some great food. I mean, in Berry Hill, where we worked, I couldn't believe the quality of the food around. The restaurants were amazing. I mean, the only sort of cultural thing we did is one night, the songwriter Jason Isbell invited us to see him play at the Ryman. So we went to the original Grand Ole Opry and saw Jason. But we were working every day. We didn't have any days off. And then on the last day before we went home, my manager threw a party for me at the studio. And so all these people I hadn't seen in ages came out from Nashville, to say hi and have a few drinks and stuff. So that was really special.
This album, the Vivian Line, is your 17th album. So what is it that inspired inspires you to keep making music for so long?
Well, oftentimes I don't want to make records anymore. And then what happens is I start getting more ideas, and then you know what I mean? And I'm grateful to have ideas. And then it's just like I get excited again. And then with this record, I hadn't been writing. I mean, I put out an album in 2020. I didn't write a single song that year. And then all of a sudden in early 2021, I had all these song ideas coming to me. And I didn't even know whether or not the record label still wanted me, you know, and if they wanted another album or who would pay for it and all that kind of stuff. But they did. And so it all came together really fast because, like I say, I wrote most of these in the early 2021, and then we recorded it in the fall of 2021. And there was by that time I had a few new songs. And so it was, yeah. So I guess it's just what I do, you know. I mean, I go for a walk and all of a sudden I come home and I have a melody in my head, and I have to sort of notice it and see if it's worth pursuing.
Yeah. Do you ever worry that your inspiration might just run out one day, or do you think it will always be there?
I don't worry about it anymore, but I used to worry about it, and I was always very, especially, you know, when my first album came out in '95, and the press were saying all these nice things, and I was really, you know, everyone kept telling me about the dreaded sophomore slump, you know, and I was like, yeah, I want to make sure my second album is good, and so I had started writing songs for my second album even before the first album came out. So by the time, you know, when it was time to record, I had like about 35 songs or something. So I've always tried to sort of stockpile songs and keep ahead of myself. I don't do that anymore, but I used to worry that, yeah, it would be time to make a record and I didn't have any decent songs.
So with your first album being praised in the way it was, I guess most people would view it as a good thing because it's good to have your album praised, but was it kind of annoying in the way that it did put pressure on you for your second album?
Well, it was mostly a good thing because I didn't have a lot of sales. So, you know, if you have no sales and no good press, and it's sort of, so at least I had all these, you know, people saying nice things that I could go to the label and say, look, I'm not crazy. Look, people really like this record. If, you know, it's just most people haven't heard it yet. And, you know, and then of course what happened was, you know, in the December of 1995, Elvis Costello held it up on a magazine, and that changed everything for me because up to that point it hadn't been released outside of North America, and the label was about to drop me because my record did not do well and they didn't like it and they didn't care about the reviews or anything. But when Elvis Costello did that, they decided, oh, I see, we need to release this over in the UK and Australia and all these places. And that's where I found my audience. And the one thing that Elvis did sort of saved my whole career, I think. And then all along, you know, because I've had a few albums that did pretty well or that sold well, but for the most part, I haven't. And so I've kind of been building this sort of following that's been kind of word of mouth and based on kind of, you know, the press, which for the most part has been fairly positive, you know.
So when you've had so many albums over the years, how do you decide what you're gonna perform live in some of your shows? Is it your favorites or is it the ones that did do well?
Yeah, it's hard actually, I find, because I don't want to play like, you know, 3-hour shows or 2-hour, you know what I mean? So I try to play like 75 to 90 minutes. And so for me, obviously because of the new album, I want to do a bunch from that. So I think I'm doing like 6 or 7 from the new record. And then the rest of it, for me, it's just a second guessing what people might want to hear and also what I may want to play. You know, like there's maybe 4 songs that I'm kind of expected to play. So I usually throw those in there, like Secret Heart and Golden Them Hills and stuff like that. And then the rest is, for me, it's a matter of maybe I'll play something that I didn't play on my last tour, and I'll try to do at least one from each record, you know, because you never know. Like sometimes at the end of the show, someone will say, hey, you didn't play anything from my favorite one or something, you know what I mean? So I try to pick at least one from each record. And so it's hard, because now, I think my sets are usually somewhere between 25 to 30 songs, and I have short songs, so I can sort of get to quite a few of them. But I don't want to be. I'm not Bruce Springsteen, I can't do a 3.5 hour show, and
Yeah.
those are reserved for people who've had actual hits, which
Yeah.
I haven't had. So
Because your songs are relatively short, do you think that leaves people wanting more?
sometimes they ask why do I write these short songs, and I don't really think about it. It's my DNA, because that's the kind of radio I grew up with. All the songs are like 250 or 350 or something.
Yeah.
I try to be concise, but it is nice in terms of, when I want to, and I'm trying to squeeze in as many songs as possible before the end of the show. I don't have to do medleys, like some people do medleys, and yeah.
Do you ever include any covers during your shows, given that so many people have covered your songs?
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to do more covers in the early days when I had less records, but now it's harder to do a cover.
Yeah.
But I usually do maybe one in the evening. On the last tour, because Burt Bacharach died, I was doing a Bacharach song, and I was also doing a Warren Zevon song some nights recently in America. So it's just a lot of it is on a whim in a way, because I sit around the house and play cover songs, so I know so many.
Yeah.
So in some nights, if the mood hits me, I might just jump into something. But I try to kind of honor the set list, and the set list changes every night too, because of people are emailing me requests and stuff. So I try to, like adjust every night. But I have a basic framework of what the set is, and there's certain places where I can insert a different song and throw in a cover song perhaps, and so yeah, but it is tricky. The more albums you make to do that, I mean, unless because in terms of in my audience, I mean, there's probably some artists who are really, really big, but who've made some albums that people don't like or something, so they just avoid those albums altogether. But in my case, some albums that I wasn't sure were any good, someone will say, "Oh, that's my favorite one," or something. You know what I mean? So it's like the people who are into me seem to be pretty devoted that way. So I do try to honor each record with at least one song.
And your songwriting has appeared on albums by Michael Bublé and K.D. Lang and Rod Stewart. Is there any particular one of their versions of your songs that stood out to you?
Well, I really liked Leslie Feist's version of Secret Heart when that came out, because it was so different from my version. It was very like Euro pop or something. Like it was like almost if, Ace of Base did it or something. I don't know. It had a cool sound. And whereas most people who have done that song have done it pretty faithfully. Emmylou Harris, when she did Hard Bargain, that was a kind of a nice surprise, because, I had over the years had my manager send her people some songs to consider that she never did. And then all of a sudden she does this song, and it's the title of a record. And I hadn't even sent this one. So
Wow.
That was interesting. But yeah, it's just always it's always really flattering when anyone decides to do that.
Now, as well as your music, you published a fairy tale a few years ago called Dear Life. What made you want to branch out into that?
Well, it's just I had this this dream. Really, it was where I woke up and I had a vision of a fairy tale. I didn't know if it was something I'd seen or. And this was like back in, I don't know, it must have been like 2013 or something. And, I walked around thinking about it, and I would talk to people. I knew some actors. I remember even talking to the actor John C. Reilly about it, and I didn't know if it was a book or if it was a movie and so just from talking to people, I got this publishing house reached out to me and asked me to come in for a meeting, and they said, "Well, this is a book, you should write it." And I said, "Well, I've never written a book before," and they said, "Just go and just try to write 1,000 words a day or whatever." And so I was just about to head out on the road. This would have been, I guess, 2015. And so I thought, I know every day while I'm out doing these long drives, I'll just write. So in the van, I'm typing away every day. And finally, I finished it. And, I was so proud because I never thought I'd ever write a book. And so it just sort of came out of nowhere. And I probably will never write another book, but now I'm in the process of trying to turn it into a movie, because I've
Oh,
written songs for it now. So
yeah, that's exciting.
it could be, yeah.
Yeah. How do you balance your music and writing projects and possible movies? And do they ever influence each other?
Well, definitely when I was writing the book, I kept imagining the characters breaking out into song just because I'm a songwriter. So when I first moved to Stratford, I didn't know anybody. So I basically wrote the entire musical the first year as I'm writing my other album too. So it was a very prolific time. So it just sort of, but like I say, the book was so out of was not in my wheelhouse. And I think it's a really good book for a guy who's never written a book before. But I'm sure if I was an actual novelist, I could have made it really like much better. But I mostly I just write songs. I'm not really competing with any other sort of thing.
Yeah.
If the movie happens, it's going to take other smarter people than me. I'm talking with an animator, an animation director at the moment about it. And just, it's exciting talking about it. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I hope it will.
Well, what's coming up for you after this album, the Vivian Line? Have you got any more plans for future projects and tours?
Well, I mean, we're just about to head out on tour in America, and then we're coming over there where you guys are. After that, I don't know really. I mean, I have new songs I'm working on, but I'm not in a big hurry to record them just yet until I know who to work with. And you usually get a feeling, it's time to make a record. But at the moment I feel kind of up in the air because I don't know if my label in Canada is going to continue with me, and I don't know which direction I should go in terms of the production. So I just in the moment I'm just rehearsing for my tour. And I'm just every day I try to work a little bit on the new songs so that when it's time, I'll be ready,
Well, this latest album is called The Vivian Line. I take it it's just available in all the usual places these days.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know it's harder. It's on vinyl and it's harder to find actual records, but I think some record stores will have it. I think you can order it somehow. I mean, I'm the worst person to ask because I don't know how anybody gets their music these days. But I think it should be on all the platforms and whatever. So yeah.
Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great having you on.
Thanks, Toby.